Yara and Jovi. The explosive car divorce showdown revealed. In a world where love stories often promise forever, some hearts find themselves at a crossroads, where holding on becomes harder than letting go. Yara and Jovi Carr, a couple once celebrated for their closeness and laughter, now face the painful reality of separation. Theirs is not just a story of two people growing apart. It is the intimate portrait of love, struggle, and the courage it takes to release what once meant everything. Their journey was never easy. Moments of joy, the laughter echoing in quiet evenings, the stolen glances in crowded rooms, the simple comfort of being with someone who knows you completely, were always accompanied by challenges. Differences that once seemed small, misunderstandings that grew silently, and tensions that refused to dissolve turned love into a battlefield. And despite countless attempts to bridge the distance, to reignite the spark, the weight of unresolved conflict became impossible to bear. Friends and family recall the signs that love was straining under invisible pressure. Conversations that once flowed freely now carried pauses heavier than words, smiles that masked hurt, and silences filled with unsaid apologies. Those who watched them closely sensed a slow drift, a gentle but unyielding pull apart, until the moment came when both realized that the life they shared no longer held the same harmony. The morning of the final decision was quiet but electric with emotion. Yara sat by the window, staring at the sunlight breaking through the curtains, her thoughts a storm of memories and regrets. Every laughter, every argument, every tender moment replayed in her mind, a bittersweet montage of a love that had defined so much of her life. Jovi, too, felt the sting of loss, the sorrow of endings, the strange relief of knowing that choosing separation might be the only way to preserve respect and peace for both. No dramatic declarations, no angry confrontations. Just two people, facing the inevitable, hearts heavy yet determined. They knew that walking apart did not erase the love they once shared, but it was a recognition that love sometimes means letting go. And in that letting go there is pain, yes, but also dignity, and the fragile hope that each can find a new beginning. This is not the story of failure. It is the story of human hearts navigating the most difficult terrain. Choosing what is right over what is comfortable, choosing healing over habit, choosing life over a love that can no longer thrive. Yara and Jovi's journey reminds us that even in endings, there is profound courage, and even in heartbreak, there is the possibility of renewal. The days after the divorce filing were filled with quiet tension, moments heavy with reflection, and the invisible ache of what was lost. Yara moved through her apartment with a strange combination of emptiness and clarity. Every corner reminded her of shared memories, the laughter that once filled the rooms, the small gestures of love that had once seemed endless, now frozen in the past. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, family, those who wanted to check if she was coping. Each message brought a pang of both comfort and sadness, a reminder that life continues even as hearts break. Jovi, meanwhile, walked through the streets he once strolled with Yara, feeling the weight of absence in the familiar surroundings. He remembered her smile in every reflective window, her laughter blending with the city's sounds. The silence around him mirrored the silence within, a quiet that was neither peaceful nor harsh, but heavy with the residue of love that could not endure. Even the simplest gestures, once mundane, now carried echoes of a life shared and lost. Friends and family, watching from the sidelines, struggled with their own emotions. They reached out, attempting to offer guidance, to provide comfort, to remind Yara and Jovi that separation does not erase the value of love. Yet, each interaction reminded them of the fragility of human connection, the painful truth that sometimes caring deeply requires stepping back, letting go, and accepting that two people who once fit perfectly together may no longer walk the same path. Yara spent long mornings staring out the window, letting the sunlight fall across her face. She thought of the arguments that escalated, the unspoken frustrations, the dreams that had once aligned now diverging. Her heart ached not only for what was lost, but for the realization that sometimes love is not enough to sustain a bond. She whispered to herself that courage was not in clinging to what was gone, but in facing tomorrow with honesty, even if it meant facing it alone. Jovi sat in quiet reflection in his office, staring at photographs of moments that once defined them, birthdays celebrated, small victories shared, evenings of laughter and ease. His chest tightened with the realization that love is complex, sometimes fleeting, sometimes enduring in ways unseen, and sometimes requiring the hardest choice: letting go. He realized that walking away does not mean failure, but a willingness to protect both their hearts from further pain. In their solitude, Yara and Jovi both experienced subtle shifts. The sharpness of grief softened into reflection. The anger, frustration, and sorrow began to mix with understanding and acceptance. They began to comprehend that their story was not one of bitterness, but of two hearts learning, growing, and preparing for a future where they could find peace apart. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting or blame, just a quiet, raw acknowledgement of reality, that the love they had was real, meaningful, and cherished, but that it had reached its natural end. And in that acceptance, a new kind of strength emerged, fragile yet undeniable: the strength to move forward, the courage to imagine a life rebuilt from heartbreak, and the hope that love in its many forms could still exist even after separation. Time moved slowly at first, each day heavy with reminders of what had been lost. But gradually, in the quiet moments between the echoes of memory, both Yara and Jovi began to discover the resilience of the human heart. Yara found herself walking along familiar streets, noticing details she had once overlooked: the way sunlight glinted off the pavement, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant laughter of children playing. Each small observation became a reminder that life continued beyond heartbreak, that there was beauty in moving forward. She started reconnecting with friends she had lost touch with, sharing meals and conversations that were simple yet grounding. Laughter returned slowly, hesitant at first, then with more certainty. The pain of separation did not vanish, but it began to soften, becoming a quiet presence rather than a constant ache. Yara realized that healing was not about forgetting Jovi, but about learning to carry the love differently, in memories, in lessons, and in the quiet courage to care for herself first. Jovi, too, navigated the subtle changes in his own life. He spent hours reflecting on the choices that led them here, understanding not only the mistakes made, but the ways in which their love had shaped him. He returned to passions he had set aside, reconnecting with work, friends, and small joys that had once been overshadowed by constant tension. He learned that solitude could be a teacher, guiding him to a deeper understanding of his own heart, teaching patience, humility, and the power of acceptance. Their interactions became rarer, yet more meaningful when they occurred. A simple message exchanged, a brief acknowledgement of care, a small smile from a distance. These moments spoke of mutual respect and the deep bond that had once united them. No drama, no recrimination, only the quiet recognition that love's form can change without disappearing entirely. In time, Yara found herself dreaming again, not of a life with Jovi, but of the possibilities that lay ahead: friendships to nurture, passions to pursue, experiences to embrace. She discovered a newfound sense of freedom, the ability to make choices unbound by compromise, yet informed by the lessons of her past. Each decision carried the subtle wisdom of love lost and lessons learned. Jovi, in parallel, embraced the solitude with grace. He allowed himself to mourn, to reflect, to hope again. He realized that moving forward did not mean erasing the past, but integrating it, accepting both the joy and sorrow that had shaped him. He found peace not in the absence of pain, but in the courage to face it, to transform it into strength. And slowly, the narrative of their lives began to shift. What once seemed like an ending revealed itself as a new beginning. The heartbreak that had once defined them became a chapter in a larger story. A story of resilience, self-discovery, and the quiet, enduring truth that love, even when it changes form, continues to teach, to guide, and to inspire. Yara walked through her apartment one evening, looking at the small plants she had nurtured in solitude. She smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of growth, both within and around her. Jovi gazed at the skyline from his balcony, a gentle breeze ruffling his hair, a sense of calm settling in his chest. Separate yet transformed by the same journey, both carried forward with dignity, strength, and the unspoken hope that life, in all its unexpected turns, still held promise. Time had softened the edges of heartbreak, but it had not erased the memories. Yara and Jovi, each in their own space, carried pieces of their shared life within them. Fragments of laughter, moments of tenderness, lessons of love and patience. These fragments were no longer anchors holding them back. Instead, they were reminders of what they had experienced, proof that their hearts had loved deeply, honestly, and fully. Yara found herself one evening sitting by the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the darkness. A soft breeze drifted in, carrying with it a sense of possibility. She reflected on the months of change, the nights of tears, the long walks alone, the conversations with friends who reminded her she was not defined by a failed relationship, but by the courage it took to survive it. She whispered to herself, "I am stronger than I knew, and I am ready to live again." Jovi, standing on the balcony of his apartment, felt the same quiet resolve. He thought of Yara, of the love they had shared, and felt a strange peace. Not every love lasts forever, he realized, but every love teaches something invaluable. He smiled faintly, imagining Yara happy, imagining himself at peace. There was no bitterness, no anger, only respect. The kind of respect born from honesty and acceptance. As days turned into weeks, the two of them began to embrace life's rhythm once more. Yara laughed freely again, discovering joy in the simplest moments. A morning coffee, the pages of a book, conversations that carried no weight of expectation. Jovi immersed himself in projects and passions he had neglected, rediscovering the sense of purpose that had once been clouded by tension and heartbreak. And yet, despite their separate paths, there remained an invisible connection, a recognition that they had shared something rare, something meaningful. They occasionally reached out with small gestures, a message of care, a fleeting smile across a crowded street, a shared memory revisited without sorrow, only gratitude. These gestures were not attempts to rekindle what was lost, but tender acknowledgments that life had been enriched by what they had experienced together. In the end, Yara and Jovi reached a place that few understand until they have walked through pain and emerged on the other side. The place of acceptance. They accepted that some stories do not end with forever, but with understanding. Some loves are not about possession, but about transformation. Their hearts, once intertwined in struggle and passion, now beat separately, yet with a shared understanding of what it means to love deeply and release with grace. The final moments of this chapter were quiet, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly powerful. Yara watched the sunset, feeling warmth fill the spaces left hollow by sorrow. Jovi walked along a familiar path, noticing the same sunset reflected in a window, a reminder that life moves forward, and healing is possible. And so Yara and Jovi's journey reached its natural conclusion. Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with dignity, love, and hope. They had let go of what could not endure, yet they carried forward the lessons, memories, and courage that would forever shape them. Life, in all its unpredictability, continued, and so did they, stronger, wiser, and open to whatever awaited beyond the horizon. Time had finally done what words alone could not. It had softened the ache of separation and allowed hearts to remember love without pain. Yara and Jovi, once bound together by passion and now separated by circumstance, had reached a fragile but profound peace. They no longer measured themselves by what they had lost, but by the strength they had gained, the lessons they had learned, and the courage it had taken to let go. Yara walked quietly through the streets she had once walked with Jovi. Every corner held echoes of laughter, gentle arguments, and stolen moments of intimacy. She felt a pang, yes, but it was accompanied by a warmth she had almost forgotten. The warmth of survival, of self-discovery, of resilience. She realized that love is not only in staying together, but also in knowing when to release, in trusting that both hearts can find light even when apart. Jovi sat by the river, watching the water flow endlessly. He thought of Yara, of the life they had shared, and a tear rolled down his cheek, not for regret but for the beauty of what had been. The love that once consumed them now existed differently, quietly, as gratitude. He whispered softly, "Thank you, for everything." Understanding that closure does not require words or reconciliation, only acceptance and a heart willing to heal. There were no dramatic confrontations, no bitterness. Just the quiet dignity of two people who had loved deeply, who had stumbled, grown, and now walked away with respect for themselves and each other. They understood that life moves forward, and that endings, no matter how painful, can carry a strange kind of grace. Yara smiled as she returned home, the weight of grief lighter than before. She allowed herself to hope again, to dream of a future where joy could exist without shadows of the past. She knew she would carry pieces of Jovi with her always, but they would no longer weigh her down. They would be gentle reminders of a love that shaped her, and of a courage she never knew she had. Jovi, too, felt a subtle peace settle in his chest. He had loved fully, lost gracefully, and now stood ready to embrace whatever life would offer next. The ache remained, but it was a soft echo, not a wound. It was proof that hearts can endure, that love can transform, and that life, even after heartbreak, continues with quiet hope. And in that final, unspoken understanding between them, two souls who had shared so much and now parted with dignity, there was a lesson for all hearts. That love is not always about holding on, sometimes it is about letting go. That strength is found not only in keeping love alive, but in releasing it when necessary. And that even in endings there is room for growth, healing, and the promise of a new beginning. Yara and Jovi walked separate paths, yet they carried the same truth within them. That love in all its forms leaves an indelible mark, and that the courage to let go is perhaps the greatest testament to the depth of the heart. The story closes not with sorrow, but with reverence for the love that was, the lessons it taught, and the quiet hope that life, with all its unpredictability, holds brighter days ahead.